Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Quantum Leap. I'm your host, Toyin Umesiri, author of Mindset of an Entrepreneur. Today, we have a special guest joining us from Washington, D.C. Here in Aurora, we're having Daniel Pichet. I'm so excited, if you can tell. Daniel is the National Director of Trade Finance at the U.S. Small Business Administration International Trade Office in D.C. As director, Daniel is responsible for the design and delivery of SBA's export loan programs and oversight of SBA's national staff of export finance managers. Prior to joining SBA, Mr. Daniel worked at First American Bank for over 15 years, where he led trade finance division and served as member of the bank's senior loan committee. Mr. Daniel served on the Department of Commerce Trade Finance Advisory Council and during the second charter term as the SBA's ex-official representative on the third charter term. Mr. Daniel holds a BS in finance from the Northern Illinois University and is an Evans Scholar alumnus. The money guy. Yeah. I'll call you the money guy.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So happy to have you.
It's great.
And fun fact, last year while I was visiting Washington, I actually met Mr. Daniel, and I'm so glad that you're visiting us today as well. So yes, such a great background. And in your leadership, really, what would you say the opportunities are? Generally speaking, at a very high level,
Sure.
What are the opportunities and what are you seeing within the export space, SBA, and international markets?
Sure. Well, it's great to be here. It's great to be back in Illinois. Born and raised in the Chicagoland area, went to Northern Illinois, so used to driving down I-88 past Aurora to head out to DeKalb, so it is very nice to be back. In terms of opportunities, when it comes to international trade, I think for a lot of small business, international trade in foreign markets is a growth opportunity. A lot of companies are domestically focused, understandably so, and as they grow and as they develop their products or refine their processes, I think that often leads to opportunities outside the country. I think Canada and Mexico are our two largest trading partners by volume based on their proximity to us. So for a lot of small businesses, especially here in the Midwest, that's what I see as an opportunity for especially our manufacturers, distributors, service and tech companies is to start opening up new international markets.
Awesome. Also help us connect the dots.
Sure.
SBA, international trade, domestic.
It doesn't always connect immediately. That's the reason I'm here today, right?
Okay.
So the SBA is a domestically focused agency. I'd say we're best known for a handful of areas. We have our loan and capital programs, the 7A and 504 are the two largest programs at the agency. We also have a large role to play on the interagency and disaster relief, obviously with Hurricane Helene recently. And then we also operate a network of district offices that are really there as resources to the local business community. So our Illinois district office is based in Chicago. So we serve a lot of roles, but really the agency is focused on the needs of small businesses, our administrators, the voice of the small business on the interagency. So international trade is a part of what the agency focuses on. I work in the Office of International Trade. We're there to help support America's small business exporters. And as I mentioned earlier, for a lot of those firms, it's really international expansion. I have a team of export finance managers who operate around the country, assisting businesses, assisting lenders, with all things related to international trade. And we also offer some loan programs, which helps companies, whether they're beginning to expand internationally or more general working capital programs that can support the longer sales cycles associated with international trade, or maybe the buildup of inventory or the fabrication of custom equipment.
Right. So your team, are they more hands-on? Because small businesses face more challenges than larger organizations that maybe have internal teams of international experts, right? So how hands-on would your team be is it a startup or established business? How hands-on would they be with them?
I think in general, we're working with the growing companies who are expanding. So I think of our team and the SBA in general as part of a constellation of resources. So the small business development centers, or SBDCs, are pretty well known to a lot of small businesses. And I think for a lot of the companies who are getting started, working on their early business plan in the early stage of their business, the SBDCs are a great resource. And a lot of times, our team is as hands-on as needed by the situation, but it's often in collaboration with other partners. Now, whether that's the SBDC network, whether that's other federal agencies like our colleagues in Department of Commerce or the Export-Import Bank, we're really working across kind of the federal, state, and local level with the business, but more oftentimes connecting them to the partners that might be in a better position to assist them. And then we're there to support on the financing side with maybe some of the more technical financing or logistical questions.
That's great. The reason I asked that question is that I feel like a lot of small businesses shy away from working with the government.
Sure, I understand. Yeah.
It's like overwhelming. Like, will they really help me?
Yeah.
And it almost feels like they negate the possibility before they even try.
Yeah, I've certainly come across that both in my time in private sector and now obviously on the public side. You know, when it comes to assisting a small business, I tend to subscribe to the there's no wrong door approach. So whether it's the SBA, even if ultimately you need to work with somebody at the Department of Commerce, we can help make that connection. But I understand, and it's also a lot of times you just don't know what you don't know, right? So there's resources available, local, regional, state, et cetera, especially at the federal side. But if you don't know that they're available, and small businesses, as you mentioned, right? They're in charge of management, production, really all things related to the business, and not necessarily out there, spending their nights researching federal trade resources.
I think that's really what I have found is that the resources abound, the support exists, the government is very invested in growing the economy and supporting the business leaders that are working hard every day to create jobs and sustain that economy. What I've found though is that many people are so busy, they are not giving time to the research, to even look up and see what's around them. And so I don't know if you have any advice.
How much time do we got?
Yeah.
No, you're right. So I think, and I take that in terms of my role in the federal side and working with my team is to make sure that our resources and information is available in an accessible format.
Yes.
So we try to think about, whether it's webinars, podcasts, replays, putting videos on YouTube, whatever it is, we have to make our content available to the small business owner who is probably consuming it in the evening. They're not, I tend to run a lot of my events at 3 p.m. Eastern, which is great if that's your day job, but if you're busy with operations, that might not be the most convenient time. So I tend to think that the social media channels, LinkedIn specifically, does a really good job of getting the information out there. The Office of International Trade, we have our own LinkedIn. The SBA has our own. And that's a really good conduit to see just what's going on. And that's not only is it going to make you aware of new loan programs or updates, but it also is where educational opportunities or trainings are promoted. And a lot of that's available for free, and you can really access that through LinkedIn. So that maybe that's the tip I can offer.
Okay, that's good. Get on LinkedIn. Yes, and I hear you have new programs released. Can you tell us about it? And thank you for bringing it to Aurora.
Yeah,
right?
I'm
awesome.
It's great timing. I'm in town for a large regional bank trade conference that I attend every year. And the SBA, we just launched the Working Capital Pilot Program, which is part of the 7A product suite. It was developed over the last year as a joint effort by the Office of International Trade and the Office of Capital Access. And it was announced publicly in June, and it went live on August 1st. So we are just past the 60-day mark of the new program, and we're excited with what we're seeing. It's being well received so far.
Right. What's different for this program?
All right. So the Working Capital Pilot is really there to bridge the gap between our domestic internet and our international offerings and our term and working capital offerings. And what we saw on the international side is that working capital is really key for companies who are exporting. They have longer sales cycles. They're often competing with sales terms. So one of the ways a small business might win a contract or bring on a new customer is to offer extended payment terms. and then you add in transportation time, which can easily be 30 days. And all of a sudden, what here in, say, Illinois might take 60 days to get paid full cycle could be easily 120.
Wow.
And so access to working capital is really important. And that's really what international trade is built on. However, at the SBA, our flagship export working capital program was a very efficient program, but it was limited only to export orders. And the idea for the working capital pilot was to take programs that are maybe more known on the structured trade or the international trade side and bring them to the domestic market. And this was so one way I think of it, and this is probably just because I'm from Illinois, is I tend to think of this as an export program for the Illinois and the Midwestern market. I was based in Miami before heading to Washington, and a lot of global trade runs through South Florida, specifically with the Americas. However, in the Midwest, a lot of manufacturers, distributors, international trade might be a growing part of the overall business, but it's a relatively smaller piece. So we need a working capital product that works for every business in the country, regardless of their export activity. And so this is a program that's not limited to exports. It's designed to support it, but it can support 100% domestic, 100% export, anything in between. And we think that's really important for businesses who might see their amount of international trade increase or decrease year to year based on opportunities. You don't want to go get new loans every time you have a new order, say if you're exporting to Europe, for instance.
Right. I love this. A little bit technical question, more of, you said support. So this program, can it be combined with, say, EXIM programs?
It can use different parts of it, yeah. So on the international side, so EXIM, they have their own working capital product. We have our own as well. We do often work with different lender groups within an institution, so it's not uncommon to have one institution work with both SBA and EXIM.
Yes.
And we subscribe to similar to the no wrong door model, we're agnostic on product.
Right,
our job is to put programs out there that can help a business. We leave it to the business and the lender to find the right combination.
Right.
Yes, but your question about pairing it with EXIM, yes, whether it's say it's their insurance product, which trade credit insurance is an important part of managing the payment risk that can be associated with international trade. And it can so business can have a working capital pilot loan, an EXIM insurance program, and they work hand in glove.
That's amazing, right? I hope people understand what that really means.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about insurance and why it is important.
Yes.
It's not to say that just because you're exporting, the buyer in whichever country it is more risky. That's not necessarily true. I think the question for a lot of businesses isn't should I sell to this company, it's more how much should I sell and what sort of terms. And that's really where the insurance comes in. Not only does it protect the business in the event of a loss, so a non-payment event, but it also helps the business understand the creditworthiness of the buyer. And a lot of times for small businesses, you might have a comfort level, and really you're leaving sales and opportunity on the table. So say you have $100,000 is what you're willing to extend in terms of credit, but you could be dealing with a very creditworthy mid-market company who could qualify for $500,000 or $1 million.
Yeah.
And those are opportunities that you might not take advantage of because you didn't leverage that. You didn't want to take the additional risk. And the insurance helps with that component. And then on the financing side, the insurance also unlocks the ability for the business to really access the highest advance rates that we offer. Yeah. And whether that's EXIM insurance, whether that's the products offered in the private market, trade credit insurance is a really important product for those growing businesses to be aware of, and it plugs directly into the working capital.
It's a game changer, really, because the businesses can then focus on operations, right? And this is a key part that I would definitely drive home within our community, because financing is one of the biggest issues. But if you can have the insurance and if you can have working capital, it just knocks down a lot of the barriers to trade. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
No, it is. It's important that businesses realize that if you're buying a piece of equipment, a piece of real estate, you have a monthly loan payment. The working capital products of the SBA, whether it's the export program, whether it's a new working capital pilot, it's really there to finance the revolving needs. So you have an interest-only payment every month, so it makes it a little easier to manage, and it scales really nicely. So as the businesses grow, as they take on new opportunities, it can unlock additional financing. Again, as orders come due, it draws in because the payments come and pay it down. And that's a really important tool because it allows a business to take on that new opportunity And why we think the working capital pilot is so important at the SBA is that now the business, no matter where the buyer is, has a program. And there's a packaging expo that we were talking about coming up here, and I think about a business who gets a large order, in your say they're exporting to Germany, and now they go get a loan because they have to produce the equipment. Well, once that order's over, the loan would close down. Well, now with the working capital pilot, you can maintain the loan year-round, year-to-year, because whether the order's in Georgia or whether the order's in Germany, it works the exact same way. And I think for a lot of Midwestern companies, and really a lot of businesses across the country, that's a really important component. They don't want to have to go get a new loan just because they got an export order. Now, by having a domestically focused program that's engineered to support exports, it really unlocks that potential because it doesn't require them to go get new financing. And frankly, we should be doing everything we can to make the programs easier and reduce friction for the small business.
Yes, and I think it speeds up the growth, right?
Yes.
To your point, right? You don't have to go different routes. If you have domestic orders, you pass it through. If it's international, you pass it through as well. The same lane.
Same lane, same process. No new paperwork. And I think it's really important. And I know we were talking, as we were talking about like what sort of advice. And I think for a business to be proactive on financing is really important, and especially on the working capital side or anything related to trade, is these opportunities tend to be larger and sometimes transformational. If a business is in the process of bringing on that new customer, to then also have to go try to figure out the financing side simultaneously, that can be challenging, it can be stressful, and frankly, it could end up costing the opportunity. The reason, getting back to that function of the working capital pilot, the ability to maintain that loan,
right,
and then load the orders onto it no matter where they are globally, that allows a business to be more proactive, to have that loan, to know exactly what can be financed, when it can be financed, what the rules are, have that relationship with the lender. And I say the working capital pilot, or WCP as we call it, but ultimately, whether that's an SBA product, an XM product, a conventional product, the important thing is the working capital and how you're going to finance those orders.
Right.
It's not the use of an SBA product or an XM product or a conventional product that matters. We're really focused on making sure that businesses have access to the capital that they need to grow. And for a lot of companies, especially those growing small businesses, that's working capital.
Awesome. So now the trade finance portion is taken care of.
Sure.
One of the topics, though, that business owners always worry about is how do I find buyers? Does your program also connect them to the trade desks through the Department of Commerce at different countries?
I'd say our office does, not so much the program itself. The WCP is really there to be the end product of the opportunities, so you can have it proactively, hopefully, but also, I think when it comes to finding opportunities, the Department of Commerce is probably the starting point. Their Gold Key program is, best in class for helping make those connections. And that's where I would start if I was a business. And we're always happy to make that introduction. So you can find us online. You can find me online. We're happy to make those introductions. But ultimately, our colleagues at Commerce are really the best at it.
That's amazing. One of the things we do, like from a business supply chain standpoint, is helping clients connect the dots of, what's your buyer's journey, what's your supply journey, So trade finance oftentimes is the part of the end game when you start negotiations, all of those things. However, for me, I feel it's still it can be a mental block if that's not resolved early in the conversation. Right? It can make the negotiations not go smoothly if you're worrying about, can I really afford to fulfill this? Like bringing that kind of mindset into a room doesn't help you, sweep the table, right? You leave money on the table.
Exactly.
But so having the relationship, I say upfront, having that relationship gives you confidence going in to talk to the buyers. That's what I think.
I always joked, I had a customer who always had this export financing loan. He never used it. So I used to joke it was the lowest yielding loan I ever had. But for him and for his business, he wanted to know exactly what he could finance in every order. And that's really, that's always stuck with me, and that's been probably more than a decade now. Because for him, it was knowing that if I got that order, I could finance it.
Yes, I moved with
and
speed.
I knew exactly what I can finance. I can finance, in the case of our export program or the working capital pilot, in a lot of situations, it's 100% of direct costs. So it's the labor, that's the materials, components. He knew that by maintaining this line, one of the features that the WCP has is it has a low annual fee that's associated with it, so it's easy to maintain year to year. He knew that if I got that order, I knew exactly what I could finance ahead of time, so he could sketch it out, and that was really important for him. And that's something that I joked about it, like, oh, not using a loan, are you?
Yeah.
But now, what an important tool that was for him is that you have it ahead of time, you know it's there, and really, even to your point about the barrier, one of the pieces that we're working on at the SBA is looking at, what is the customer journey, right? From that business who's a startup, they're growing, they're expanding now, maybe they're looking to international markets. So some companies are born global, they're thinking exports out of the gate. Others, it might be, exactly, that's why we're here. Others are, they come around to it, or they have an opportunity, or one of their customers makes a referral to somebody who's in, say, Canada, for instance, right? And I think for a business to understand the financing available and the requirements at each step of the journey is important. And whether the WCP is a product that will be used by a business, or say some of the resource partners or stakeholders or counselors that are working with them, that's not the relevant part, but understanding what it takes to access financing at, say, the $500,000 mark, the above $1 million mark, the larger, that's really important for a company who's thinking years out, beginning to prepare.
Yep.
I think it's really important to know what's needed at each step of your journey, what's going to be expected of you at that step, so that you can prepare in advance, because you don't want to be, you got the large international order, now I need a loan, then I go to the bank and I realize, the bookkeeping and the financial statements aren't where they need to be, and you can just start to see it all fall apart.
I agree, because it has to be more strategic, right?
Yes.
And again, businesses, this is part of the growth opportunities for small businesses. Like, I served as a strategist for Fortune 1. You're looking 3-5 years out into the future, and so there's an entire strategy team that is dedicated to not what we're doing today, but what we're going to be doing next year and 2 years, and where the world is going, because you want to build for that future, right?
Exactly.
But small businesses, literally, let's keep the lights on today, right?
My father-in-law has a tool and die shop in Western Pennsylvania, and he can always call me if he has questions about international trade. But he's busy running the shop and trying to find machinists to work and getting orders in and delivering those orders. And then occasionally he does get orders. He's in Erie, Pennsylvania, so it's very short trip across the lake to get to Canada. But yeah, exactly. They're worried about the day-to-day in a lot of cases, but hopefully there's enough information out there. There's good stakeholder networks and resource partners that at least it's there for when they begin to look. And hopefully from a promotion and awareness standpoint, that's what we're trying to raise.
Awesome. I love this, and I'm enjoying this conversation. Let's bring it home to Aurora.
All right, good.
Okay. Aurora is a growth opportunity, second largest city in Illinois. Lots of businesses, that I believe is ripe for international.
Sure.
So for them to consider the first time exporter, right? What should they be thinking about? What type of comforts, like how do you encourage them to take that leap of faith? Because the very first step, when you've never done something, is by faith.
Yes, absolutely.
Just try it out.
Sure.
But that's the hardest jump ever, is that first one.
Yes.
Now, the second, third jump, you learn from your previous jump. But that first time exporter leap, what advice would you have for people to just trust the process and test the process?
It's always easier for me to say it when I'm not the one leaping, right?
I know, but you catch them though. You catch them.
I will. So I look at it this way. In every business, is different. So you got to look at a product that has a market internationally, right? So let's just pick a manufacturer, and I think that's really where, and fortunately for businesses in Aurora and businesses in the Chicagoland area, you have the Illinois DEC, which I know you're obviously part of. I met with them when I was in town last in the spring.
Awesome.
And I think there's a lot of really good resources. So it's not, I think it's not necessarily, I have the order now, what do I do? It's more, okay, I think there's a market for my product or my service outside the country. Okay, now let's take a look at what resources are available. So Illinois has a really strong small business development center, or SBDC network. You have great resources in the Illinois DEC. You got Migrate team here in Chicago as another resource. having that conversation, I think, is a really good starting point.
Yes.
Because ultimately, it's not about the payment risk, which I know is what the finance folks tend to focus on a lot, or the logistical risk. I mean, Illinois is a transportation and logistics hub. You got great providers, great freight forwarders, and trade supply chain professionals here. But because as a business, you can get paid up front. You can get paid before you ship. There's no payment risk, right? You got the cash in pocket, and then you send your product or you invoice for your service. I think it's really understanding the market. And if a company is growing, they think that, okay, international could be an opportunity. Right. I do think that ultimately the trade credit insurance program is a really good starting point, because it's pay as you go. You can add individual buyers onto it. You can use it to kind of test the water a little bit, right? Oh, I got XYZ company. Oh yeah, they're approved for this limit. Okay, that helps get you comfortable with it. And ultimately, start small. You don't need to take the largest buyer and the largest opportunity you've ever had. Start with something that is impactful, but you're not all in on. That could be one way, right? You can dip your toe in. And fortunately, with the resources available both at the local level in the city, with Illinois DEC, I do think there's a lot of options out there. And for a lot of businesses, to your point about looking 2 and 3 and 5 years out, it's a good conversation to have before the opportunity comes along, because you want to prepare for it. You want to make sure the business is in place. I mean, with my background in finance and banking, I'd say have that conversation with your lender as well. Most lenders have familiarity with it, have customers, have that conversation about what they can support too, and really try to build a little kitchen cabinet, right, of resource partners, of advisors and colleagues that you can go to with questions.
Right. I've also heard the saying that those businesses who export pay better wages.
Better wages, they have longer lifespans, and I think it's a few things, right? As you mentioned in the journey, it tends to be at the latter leg in terms of growth, right? These are companies that are a little more established, a little bit larger, and that probably has something to do with it, but wages and benefits come as a result of that.
Yes.
I mean, frankly, when you can open up your customer base to global markets, that's you're not just tied to the local Midwestern market or the U.S. market. Now you can really look at opportunities across the globe, and that can really help. I mean, we saw it. In fact, COVID was very instrumental in a lot of things. We saw the supply chain. I think everybody, my parents even have a better understanding of the global supply chain now. But we also saw markets open and close at different paces, and the ability to adjust and pivot is just easier when you have more options. And now with, even for companies that might be more, B2C based, so they're selling to consumers, like having platforms, Etsy, eBay, Amazon, all these different options can open up global markets without you even having to think of yourself as an exporter. Administrator Guzman is the head of the SBA right now. She has coined this term accidental exporter. And it makes sense, right? Because you're selling your goods and your wares, but all of a sudden you got buyers in the UK and you got buyers in Mexico City. And it's a really good opportunity for international expansion, because it takes a little bit of the edge off. You don't have to do it on your own. Frankly, the platform will take care of it in some cases too. Yeah.
What regions of the world would you say there are opportunities? We've had the Consul General of Canada here. There's a very, almost sister-like relationship, right? That mirrors, right? Canada, Mexico. I've also had Judith from Exim here, where she talked about Africa being a focus. I believe Claire also did mention that. So when we're encouraging, right, U.S. businesses, small businesses to export, what are those low-hanging fruits that the penetration is actually a lot easier for a first-timer? But if you're an expert, you could go to Germany, right? You could, right? There's some regions where the barriers are higher.
They can be, yeah. And I think it's twofold, right? It's not only the country and the trade relationship and trade negotiation between, so you look at USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. There are neighbors. They are our two largest trading partners. They're right next door. I think that makes a lot of sense. We have trade relationships, obviously, with the EU and other blocs. That tends to be where I tend to think of like from a market perspective. But ultimately, while we might have good opportunities, say in Canada and Mexico, just to keep it with our neighbors, well, you also have to think about where does your product have a fit, and where is there an opportunity,
Absolutely.
and where, and that's what I think small businesses are so good at is pivoting and being nimble and finding the opportunity and figuring out how to be a disruptor, maybe do things a little bit differently, a little bit better. I do think trade with Africa is a huge opportunity for all really any exporter, because I think it's such a growing market, and there's a lot of opportunities in terms of the market for a variety of products, right? So it's a combination of where does your product have a fit, and then maybe what is you want modest trade barriers, and some markets have higher trade barriers than others, and I think that's ultimately, if I had a question, I'm calling my colleagues at Commerce on that.
Absolutely. One. It's quite interesting. Okay, so when it comes to trade with Africa, I'm definitely heavily involved.
Sure.
It's quite interesting to see the adjustments the African government is making to welcome U.S. exports, and there's actually I'm not sure most people know about it, but the African Union actually has a trade policy specific for African Americans, African diasporas.
The diaspora, yeah.
They actually consider it trade on the continent.
Really? Okay.
It's a slice. They call it the 6th region of Africa.
Okay.
So they actually consider any descendant of Africa as trading on the continent within the AFCFTA, the new trade bloc, the largest trade bloc, right? It's kind of like, the fine print.
Yeah. See, and this is why I do this, because now I'm learning something. Yeah,
right. It's an interesting thing where they're saying we're carving a spot for this demographic of people, because they know because of history of Africa, there's a lot of descendants of Africa all over the world, and they want to establish a commerce trail, a bridge back home, and so they've put some incentives in their policy to say the 6th region of Africa is going to be handled for any diaspora anywhere in the world. We're going to treat you differently because we see it as you're trading on the continent. And so that's an interesting slice that it's open. It opens a new door of incredible opportunities where it's like you're not just knocking on the door.
Right.
Kind of when you're looking for a buyer, it's like, oh, look,
you're bringing in.
We've been waiting for you.
And it's you mentioned, we speak of it as the continent a lot. It's not one country. It is there's obviously a block, but there's also organizations like Afro-Exim Bank that can help and facilitate commerce at the financial institution level. And it's similar. There's a couple of these organizations. There's a similar group that's targeted for Middle East and North Africa, that's really there to help facilitate the movement of payments and goods.
Yes.
So, and those are the resources that, certainly open up opportunity. And again, I think that's why.
I love this because Afro-Exim Bank, I actually in 2018, that's how I got literally the entire strategy, right? Because I served as a ambassador for one of their major events. So that kind of opened myself up to, this is on the books. This is how you interpret this. Nobody knows, right? So that's where that kind of nuanced information, and it's an absolute game changer. So it's a passion space for me as well, as an immigrant American, and it's just a natural fit for those who want to export, right? Because they're new to export, but it's a natural destination for them.
And we've seen that. I think that's one of the strengths that the diaspora communities have. And again, I mentioned I was based in Miami for many years, and you have the same with the Latin American diaspora there, and a lot of trade flows through Miami, and a lot of the companies who are doing exporting there, have immigrated from the country, and then they start fanning out from there. And I think the same is true, really with most markets, and that's why I think that's what really makes international trade an interesting industry.
I see that's the fun side. You're making money and you're connecting, you're connecting resources, connecting people. And when I traveled to Egypt 2018, I really had fun, good food and everything.
And business begets business, right?
Absolutely.
You have an opportunity, you see it through, you deliver for your customer, and all of a sudden they might have a friend.
Oh, yes. Okay, so thank you so much. In wrapping up, I want to bring it more into leadership, right? I always ask my guests to just share their leadership tips, like what makes you not makes you what decisions do you make, what type of leadership decisions do you make, and what's your
Sure.
secret to your success, if
I
you
don't,
can share
I don't know if
the
I have a
secret.
secret. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay.
I think in general listening.
Listening?
I have 2 young boys, so
Okay.
I do my best listening. But also, as somebody, I have a team of individuals. I have products that are used by our lending partners. Really listening and getting out and getting the feedback, like what's working, what's not working,
Okay.
what adjustments. The working capital pilot was a function of feedback from our customers, from our lending customers, from our borrowers. I worked a lot with the program as a lender, so I had my own personal experiences, but also wanted to hear, what are the pain points? What's the unnecessary friction? How do we smooth it out? How do we make it a little bit better? And ultimately, then I think that also dovetails into incentives and really trying to focus on incentivizing the behavior. As somebody manages the team, like, what's our mission? What are we looking to do? What's our best way to do this? How do we make those long-term investments to be a good stakeholder and a good partner to, really, because we have almost 2 different groups of customers. We have the small businesses and we have the lenders, but we also have the entire stakeholder network around it. So what can we do to be a better partner to improve our products? And frankly, we should be listening. If we're standing still, we're not doing our job. So
Yeah, I think listening is service, some form. I'm working on it. I think I do it better
Yeah.
on my job. But when you talked about your kids, like how old are they?
my oldest just turned 10, and so 10 and 7.
Yeah, so I think I'm also trying to bring that to my private, personal life. I think it's easier for me to listen.
I say listening in the hope that they will someday listen
Oh
to
my
me.
gosh.
So-
Yeah, I think it's tougher. The private one is like, because you're so involved, your heartstrings, your emotions are so
Yeah.
involved. I think, but listening, definitely I see it as a service, but sometimes we can get in the way of listening. So, but it requires us to prioritize their own needs for us to listen.
And I think from a business perspective, if you're listening, whether it's the voice of your community, whether it's your customers, your employees, it's not that you're always going to be able to make every change,
Right.
but ultimately just listening and making changes, and I think it's the right signal, right? It's
I
like,
agree.
yes, this conversation is important. I might not be able to make every change,
Yeah.
but when we can, we're going to find ways to do it. And ultimately, from a small business perspective, I think listening is how you find your angle. And it's
agree.
really what a lot of it is. You can be nimble. So much of the innovation and creativity in our economy comes from small businesses. And that comes from them listening and maybe seeing their needs go unmet, or seeing an opportunity to do it better, or a group that might be a little underserved. They can step in and fill that, and that creates a great opportunity for them and benefit downstream for their customers.
Oh, thank you. That's a wonderful secret that you shared. Thank you so much. Any parting words as we wrap up today?
I really appreciate the opportunity. It's always good to be back in the Chicago area.
And anytime you're back,
Back in
let
Aurora
us know.
specifically, yes.
Yes, back to Aurora. We'll make it bigger. We'll do something else.
Not on my account. So
I would love to,
All right.
so, okay. So
Great.
thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you everybody for watching this episode of Quantum Leap. I'm sure the resource we've shared with you is going to help you. And if you have any questions, do go to my website, toyinumesiri.com, and definitely you can access more resources there. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Pleasure.